All right, guys, let's reintroduce our guest. We got a reoccurring guest to the Home Field podcast. We got Kevin Valentin, host of the 1046 and 1 podcast. Kev, what's going on, man?
What's going on, brother? Happy to know. 6 years later, still saying Valentin, man. Loving it, loving it.
Yeah, man.
It's my dog.
With that said, we got a lot to get to. So, first things first, we had a pretty good week of NFL games this past Sunday. Uh, First game we'll go into will be the Sunday night matchup that we had against the Chiefs and the Raiders last night. So, the Chiefs won a close one, 35-31 against the Las Vegas Raiders last night. Overall, Mahomes had a pretty solid day outside of the one interception that he threw, and he led the game-winning drive through a touchdown pass to Travis Kelce with about 35 seconds left in the game. What did you think of this game overall?
Honestly, if I'm being blunt, I'm shocked. I know that we had talked about previously in the year that we thought Oakland was going to be, Las Vegas was going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little on the gritty side. You know, everybody was in question with how Gruden kind of managed the team the second he got there, trading away his best players and grabbing those picks. And I mean, so far it's turned out pretty good as of late in terms of how productive the team has been. I mean, the defense is swarming, the offense is moving, the run game is finally coming into form with Josh Jacobs. So I mean, the fact that they took the Chiefs all the way to the literal end of the game and then taking them and beating them the game before last when they previously played, I think that Las Vegas is trending in the right direction, and I think that they need a few more pieces to make them a real contender.
I think the one interesting thing that I was watching last night was how like Derek Carr was really efficient last night. I mean, I know he threw that one interception, but that was at the end of the game when they were trying to make something happen. But overall, I mean, I'm just looking at his stats right now. He was pretty efficient. He was 23 of 31 through 275 yards and had 3 touchdowns. And then not only that, you had Josh Jacobs, even though he didn't have what I would consider like his best game of the year, had like 15, 20 carries and only had 60 yards, but still got a rushing touchdown. And for the most part, like the Raiders were in it, if not winning for the most part of the game. It's just after that Jason Witten touchdown, like right around 2 minutes, Patrick Mahomes got the ball back, and you pretty much knew it was going to be game over after that. And Mahomes led probably one of the easiest game-winning drives I've ever seen.
I mean, Pat Mahomes is once in a generational talent, obviously an MVP favorite, probably one of the best, if not the best player in the league right now at his position and all around. So, I mean, when you give Pat Mahomes time on the clock, you give him motivation and you give him Andy Reid goes, "Hey, I need you to go score for me." 9 times out of 10, Pat's going to go do that no matter who's on the opposite side of the field. And like I had stated, Oakland is trending or Las Vegas is trending, but they're not an intimidating enough defense for me to say Pat isn't going to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, at this point, like when it comes to Patrick Mahomes, I mean, he's, I wouldn't say like far and away the MVP, but he's a pretty solid player to pick for the MVP lead right now. I know there's still players like Russell Wilson that you can consider that is still in the MVP race, but as of right now, I think Patrick Mahomes definitely has it in his favor moving forward until like the last couple weeks of the season.
I would agree. Russell's been struggling lately with the turnovers, and Kyler obviously had a subpar outing the other night when he injured his shoulder. So, I mean, I think Pat continues to play at the level that he is, and Russell continues to make the little bit of tidbits and mistakes that he does. I think that Pat's going to end up running away with it within the next 2-3 weeks.
I mean, with the win, I mean, the Chiefs moved to 9-1. At this point, they have a pretty solid grip on the AFC West. They're pretty much essentially a lock to win the AFC West at this point. And arguably, they're the best team in football. If the other team that I could really think of at this point that's maybe better than them are the Steelers, just because they're still undefeated. But the Chiefs are on a roll right now, and it's weird because like the only teams that they've really struggled against this year have all been AFC West teams. They struggled against the Raiders the first time, and then the other matchup that they had in the AFC West was against the Chargers, and the Chargers pushed them to overtime.
Yeah. Chargers led
So,
that game for like the whole game, and then Patty had to go and drive him back. But still, nevertheless, you're right. It's all divisional teams.
but outside of that, I think the Chiefs have been solid so far, and it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, depending on what happens to Pittsburgh may drop a game or two, and then the Chiefs kind of sneak in to get that number one seed. But the way that I see it, they're either going to be the number one or number two seed. I don't see any other team in the AFC really threatening them at this point.
I would agree completely. Pittsburgh will give something eventually. I don't see them going undefeated, as I stated on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. But I'm looking at their schedule right now. Pittsburgh's kind of had a pretty easy walk through the park in terms of their undefeated season. If I'm reading this correctly, they have only played three teams over 500 in their
Hmm.
10 games. So, I mean, just a quick overview: the Giants, the Broncos, the Texans, the Eagles, the Browns, in which they dominated them by 31 points,
Hmm.
the Titans, the Ravens, and then yeah, that's it. So four, and I don't even consider the Browns game really a competitive one. So if you really think about it, three teams.
Yeah, and I mean the two games that they had back to back, I think were the Ravens and the Titans, and they handled them pretty well from what I remember.
Yeah, 27-24 Tennessee, and then 28-24 against the Ravens.
And I know the Steelers are playing the Ravens this week, so
Yeah.
I think they're playing on Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah, and Baltimore is struggling. Lamar Jackson's woes are continuing, and it just breaking news as of a couple of hours ago: J.K. Dobbins and Ingram tested positive for COVID, so it doesn't seem like they're going to be available for this Thursday.
Yeah, there's no way that they're gonna get out of that COVID protocol by Thursday. That's just not gonna happen.
Yeah, so not trending in the right direction for Baltimore.
But I mean, I'll tell you this: like when I usually do my power rankings every week, I have the Steelers at the number one spot just because I give respect to the fact that they're still the only undefeated team left, and they're beating the teams that are on their schedule. It's not like they're losing to inferior teams. They're going out and dominating these teams. I mean, they dominated the Jaguars yesterday. They won 27-3. I mean, Big
Yeah,
Ben had a solid day. I mean, Chase Claypool has 10 touchdowns in 10 games as a rookie. He's definitely in the rookie of the year conversation. Whether he wins it or not is another thing, but he's definitely in the conversation. And then on top of that, you had Deontay Johnson yesterday. He had 12 catches and 111 receiving yards. So the wide receiving core for the Steelers has been solid this year, and really over like the last like 10 years or so, the Steelers have always fielded a really solid wide receiving core, and it pretty much remains the same for this year too.
I would agree with that completely. They always find a way to have diamonds in the rough, as I like to say, and they always find a way to make sure that they keep that young core kind of together. And Ben just likes to dish it out. And I mean, you've seen it from week to week. One week it'll be Claypool, one week it'll be Johnson, one week it'll be Juju. It doesn't really make a difference. It's not like when Anthony what's his name? Oh my goodness. Knucklehead. Antonio Brown, excuse me. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like when he was there, it was like he needed the ball at all times. Genuinely, Ben can divvy it up. Ben can throw it to the check down to the backfield. He can hit Ebron in motion. So I mean, the offense of this Pittsburgh Steelers is definitely clicking, and they are dominating those teams. So it's just a matter of who's going to knock them off.
And not only that, I mean, dude, they had 4 turnovers yesterday on the defensive side of the ball. Granted, they're playing against Jacksonville. Jacksonville sucks. I mean, they've lost what 9 or 10 straight games at this point. They're just a
Yeah, the
terrible.
one the one win they
Yeah,
have. Yeah. I'm
yeah,
aware.
yeah. We're gonna totally forget about that. That was the first game of the year, but I mean, I have them on. I have the Steelers as my fantasy defense, and they've been balling out. They got me like 20 some points yesterday, and
Every week.
I mean, it was crazy because I was going up against a guy who had the Browns defense, and they ended up getting like 24, 25 points because they had like 5 sacks, that pick six, and like 3 turnovers. But the Steelers defense has been balling out pretty much the entire year, and I mean, like I said, you could credit that to the teams that they're playing against. They really only probably played against 3 or 4 quality teams at this point in the year. And I mean, at this point, the Steelers are probably going to go either 14-2, maybe 15-1. Because I mean, the teams that they have left don't really threaten them in any sort of way. There may be 1 or 2 matchups that they might drop, but
I wouldn't say threatened, but based off of what I'm seeing, so they got obviously the Ravens on Thursday, then they have Washington. They go to Buffalo. They go to Cincinnati, but that's without Joe Burrow, so that's an automatic win unless they clinch and they want to rest Ben. I mean, it really depends. Then the Indianapolis Colts have to go over there 2 days after Christmas, and then they have to play Cleveland, in which I think will be a tough game because we have to remember Cleveland is fighting to get into the postseason,
mm-hmm.
with obviously the leading two teams in that division being them and Pittsburgh are trying to fight for a wild card spot.
Yeah. And I, I mean, at this point, like, I mean, at this point, like the AFC North is one of the most competitive divisions in the league. Really, outside of
The
them and
NFC West.
the NFC West. I mean, those are really the only two divisions where you could realistically see. I mean, like realistically, I see two teams making it out of the NFC West this year, but there's a very good chance that you might have three teams coming out of the AFC North this year. It would not surprise me because you got to remember they added that extra wild card spot this year for the playoffs. So there's going to be 7 teams instead of 6. So that'll be definitely something to look forward to, just to kind of see how those last couple of weeks turn out for really the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Browns at this point. But let's segue to one of the other exciting games this past weekend. We had the Colts go up against the Packers. Colts won in a shootout, 34-31 in overtime. Overall, Rivers had a solid day, 24-36, 288 yards through 3 passing touchdowns, had 1 interception. Then on the flip side of the ball, we had Aaron Rodgers, was 27-38, 311 yards, 3 TDs, and 1 interception. I mean, you watch this game, and the way that I kind of saw this game was it was really kind of a tale of two halves. I really thought that the Packers really kind of controlled the pace, controlled the tempo in the first half, and then in the second half, it just completely flipped to the Colts. I don't even think that the Packers had the ball more than 10 minutes in the second half just because the Colts were able to get some good, long, sustainable drives and get points out of them. So, really, overall, what did you think about this game?
So obviously, the world knows I am probably one of the biggest Colts fans on the face of the planet. So watching this game not only gave me a potential aneurysm, but I felt like I was going to keel over a few times during the throughout the entire integrity of this game. Starting it off from beginning all the way through the end, I think we started off really slow. I think the offense kind of got it going a little early, and we went down the field and we scored. But the defense, for whatever reason, blown coverages, blown assignments, just mismatches. I don't know what it was. I thought Aaron Rodgers was just feeling it, and then you go and look at the film, you look at the breakdown at halftime, and you're just sitting there and you're saying, if we're just in the right position at the right time, if we just give a little bit more pressure, if we, cover that receiver for one more second, maybe we get a hand on that ball. It was just miscues. And then in that second half, shout out to Matt Eberflus, man. Our defensive coordinator rallied the group, rallied the troops, and completely flipped the script. We got the ball at halftime. We went out there and we did what we needed to do. The offense completely dominated, just running the ball and draining that clock. Defense did their job, creating 4 or 5 turnovers. And I think overall, this was a big confidence booster. We are now still atop the AFC South, but this was a big testament to the defense, and it goes to show we're number 1 in the league for a reason. The Green Bay Packers only scored 3 points in the second half, so that's a big kudos to that front 7 right there, saying, "Hey, we may not be sacking you the entire time, but you're going to feel that pressure." And we forced a lot of turnovers, so that was big.
And not only that, like the one thing that I liked about the Colts offense yesterday, specifically with Philip Rivers, was that he was spreading the ball around extremely well yesterday. He threw to 12 different receivers yesterday. And really like the leading like receivers on the team, I don't think any player outside of Jonathan Taylor had more than 3 catches. I think Jonathan Taylor had 4 catches. He was technically the leading receiver as far as catches go yesterday. But everybody else, whether it was T.Y. Hilton, whether it was Pittman Jr., whether it was I think Mo Alley Cox, I think he only had 2 catches, but there were like 3 or 4 guys in that receiving core that had really just 3 catches. But like overall, like when you have like 4 or 5 receivers and they're all getting about 30, 40 yards throughout the game, overall, like you could tell that Rivers was definitely trying to disperse the ball around and definitely get it to different guys that were open, whether it's down the field or opening up to the flats where the running backs can make some plays. I liked what they did, and really running the ball. I know that you've had some of your issues with Jonathan Taylor this year, but as far as I'm concerned, I thought he had a pretty solid second half yesterday. He had some good chunk plays yesterday where he was picking up 10 to 15 yards. And I remember there was one play in particular where it seemed like the Packers were getting a solid edge rush where they basically shut down the right side of where they were trying to run the ball, where the Colts were trying to run the ball. Jonathan Taylor runs it to the inside, turns what might be a play that goes for 1 or 2 yards in the backfield, ends up turning it into a 15-yard gain and a first down. And it's like for me at this point, when it comes to Taylor, the best thing that you could hope for is just consistency. They did give him the rock yesterday. They gave him 20 plus carries, which is more than any of the games that he's had this season. And I think if he's able to find those holes and able to exploit those gaps in the defense, At some point he's going to have a 100-yard rushing game this year. I'm confident of that if they decide to give him more touches, because I think at this point, the way that they have their running back set up, I like what they have with those three running backs with Wilkins, with Hines, and Taylor. I really think that Taylor's probably, I mean, this is just me. Taylor should be the main running back. Hines is a solid option out of the backfield for pass plays. And then Wilkins is kind of like a decent option, whether you want to give him 5 to 6, 10 carries a game, you can do that. He's also good in the passing game as well. So I think really, if they're able to kind of work out those three running backs and really kind of set some solid roles with them moving forward, it could bode well for them moving into the playoffs this year.
Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the only thing I disagree with is I've said it from the beginning. Jonathan Taylor, the draft pick, confused me. We talked about it draft night. I didn't see a purpose in it. I mean, obviously Marlon Mack ended up falling early in the season to a torn Achilles, but I mean, I was very confused. And early on in the season, I think he had the 100-yard rushing game. I don't remember if it was against Minnesota or Jacksonville. I know it was in the first 2 or 3 weeks, so he did eclipse the 100-yard mark. However, after that, for whatever reason, John was just he wasn't seeing the field well. He wasn't making proper reads. I mean, our offensive line is probably one of the best, if not depending on who you ask, bias aside, the best offensive line in terms of protection and running the ball. Not this season, but uh, John was just kind of missing his opportunities, man. I mean, you saw the film, you would see breakdown, you would see reviews days after, weeks after, and you're just like, like it was almost as bad as Trent Richardson, where the hole would be there, but Jonathan is so used to running through the brick wall, as I called it in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
The man was averaging 7 or 8 yards a carry in college. It was just completely unheard of. And I mean, I don't know if it's bad habits, bad tendencies. I just felt that he wasn't making the right reads, which is why his touches decreased as the weeks went on. And Jordan Wilkins had a game or two where he was, when he was given 15 to 20 touches and he made the best of his opportunities. Naeem Hines, as we've also discussed, he was making great use of his carries, not only out of the backfield and on check down and on third down, but in those draw plays, in the shotgun, making plays out of the backfield as well. So I think that we have a great three-headed monster, similar to what the Giants had back in the early 2000s, where they had Ward, Bradshaw, and Jacobs. Obviously, I would say Taylor's probably our Brandon Jacobs, but a lot shorter.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we have a great diverse running back room. And if we can continue to give Taylor the rock and him do what he did last week, we're obviously going to get Braden Smith back from injury. He hurt his thumb in practice, which is why the Packers seem to collapse a lot on the right end. I truly and honestly believe 100% healthy, all three of our tight ends healthy. Our running game, if our head coach decides to get his head out of his butt, can really, really, really shock this league. And I really think we can make a run in this postseason.
Yeah, and I think at this point, they're setting themselves up well for the playoffs right now. If they can continue this for the next couple of weeks, I think, like, for me, like, realistically, I think the best record that I think that they're probably going to get is probably somewhere around like 11-5. If they go the rest of the year and only lose one game, that'll be really impressive to end the season 12-4. I just don't see that. I see them going either 11-5, 10 or 6, but that might be enough to win them the division. We're gonna have to see how Tennessee kind of plays these last couple of weeks, and I know the Titans and the Colts match up one more time, so
next week
we'll see how it goes. But moving on, kind of on a sadder note, was the Bengals Washington football team game. Joe Burrow went down with a torn ACL yesterday, early in the third quarter. Just overall, it just tough to see that, because I was watching the highlights from that game yesterday, and granted, I know that the Bengals weren't putting up a lot of points. They only put up 9 points in the first half, but just looking at the way that Burrow was in the pocket, when he actually gets protection from his own line, which has been questionable this year, he can actually make some really solid and accurate throws. And to me, he seemed pretty confident yesterday. He had some nice throws in the first half, and then unfortunately went down with that torn ACL in the second half. Just kind of a tough thing to see, because he was definitely at the top of the rookie of the year conversation this year.
Absolutely. Once again, we talk on the regular about football. So, we both know the season he had at LSU, everyone kind of thought that it wasn't going to transition. And everyone, being a lot of analysts, said that he was going to struggle. They didn't have a lot of weapons. AJ Green is a shell of himself. Their record didn't show it, but I said from day one, the kid didn't look like a rookie. Joe Burrow's been playing like a 5, 6 year veteran. He takes hits, he gets up, he learns from his mistakes, he makes good reads, he throws receivers open, he steps up in the pocket, he's very aware. You can see him checking at the line of scrimmage, trying to change, trying to audible out of certain situations. Rookies don't do that.
Hmm.
We've seen top 10 picks, number one overall picks that have just folded. And I mean, absolutely, completely collapsed. A recent example, Mitchell Trubisky went two, and he can't throw a football out of a paper bag.
Hmm.
So to go and see a number one overall pick, as hyped as he was, live up to it and then exceed expectations, at least in my opinion, to go down like this. Sadly enough, we knew it was coming. That offensive line in Cincinnati is abysmal.
Yep.
It's just sad to see him go the way that he did because he not only tore the ACL, they're saying there's further structural damage. And the report from Shefty came out today that he also tore his MCL. So it's looking like a painful recovery going into 2021 for Joe Burrow.
Yeah, but I'll tell you this: like he's really, I think, the type of player that can bounce back from this. There's definitely a confidence and swagger that he carries with him, not only just on the field but off the field as well. And I think for him moving forward, I think he'll be okay. But I'll tell you what, from a front office standpoint, they've got to do something with that offensive line because he cannot take that constant pressure that he's getting. I mean, it's kind of similar to like what's going on with Deshaun Watson in Houston, where half the time he's just trying to evade pass rushes because his offensive line can't protect him. And not only that, it puts a lot more pressure on the quarterback because if your offensive line's not blocking well in pass rush, more than likely they're not going to be run blocking that well either. It's not like Giovanni Bernard or Joe Mixon have had breakout years this year where they're chewing off multiple 100-yard rushing games this year. I mean, overall, the Bengals have been struggling all year. And I think it really kind of starts with that offensive line. They have some solid talent at the receiver position. You got AJ Green, you got T. Higgins. I mean, those guys can ball. But if your offensive line is just not going to step up and protect your number one asset in the quarterback and establish some running lanes for your running backs, that offense isn't going to go anywhere.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I mean, I know that I said that people didn't expect that receiving core to be as good as it was, but it ended up, like you said, turning out to be great. I mean, Boyd is probably a top 5 receiver in terms of yards and consistency and receptions right now in the league. T. Higgins is up and coming out of Clemson. And I mean, AJ Green is still AJ Green to a certain extent. So, I mean, they're doing what they need to do. Obviously, Mixon has been hurt for the last 3 to 4 weeks. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that he just got placed on IR. So the run game has taken a hit. But that offense has shocked a lot of people in the consistency that it has provided. They're losing a lot of close games, and they're losing because the offensive line can't assist Joe Burrow in keeping him on the field, which in turn puts that struggling defense back on the field.
So moving on, we'll go on to the Ravens Titans game yesterday. This was a really competitive game yesterday. I thought overall, I thought the Ravens had this game yesterday, but really in the second half, it's just the Ravens couldn't get anything going offensively. And then in the second half, the Titans just dominated for the most part. I mean, the Ravens were up 21-10, and then pretty much at the end of the game, the Titans just took over. I mean, AJ Brown had that insane touchdown in the red zone where it looked like he was going to be tackled around maybe the 10-yard line or so. He breaks the tackle and then literally just runs over everybody. Now, granted, he had some help pushing him too, but still just took over that whole defense in that position and was able to get a touchdown and then really to clinch the game in overtime. I mean, Derrick Henry, who had really started chewing off yards in the second half, was finally getting some open holes to run through in the second half. Finally took advantage of it in overtime and got about a 30-yard rushing touchdown to end the game. Overall, the the Titans the Titans are still, I think, a good team in the AFC. Don't get me wrong; they still have their issues that they got to deal with, probably on the defensive side. And if they turn the ball over, obviously, it's not going to bode well for them either. But the Ravens have just been struggling the last few weeks. I mean, they lost against the Patriots last week in Foxborough, and then they back it up at home, losing again to the Titans. And at some point, this offense has got to get going because this offense is not getting it done. And defensively, I know they've had some injuries on that side of the ball, but they're giving up points. So this team is definitely not the same team that it was last year when they basically just ran roughshod over most of the league throughout the regular season.
absolutely. I think that it's a combination of what I've always said with mobile quarterbacks. you have that year and a half in which you kind of run through the league, you shock the league. You don't really win against the good teams as they showed last year in the postseason. They did struggle against Tennessee, who is traditionally a kryptonite to a team like Baltimore. You keep the ball out of a playmaker's hands like Lamar Jackson. You continue to make sure you capitalize on any turnover and all turnovers. And you also make sure you do score on drives that you take a long possession off the clock with. So, I mean, I don't know what's going on with Baltimore. As you stated, they did start off hot. They did go out there and do what they needed to do to a certain extent, but it seems like their offense kind of shut down late in the fourth, and they just couldn't get anything going. Tennessee smelled blood on the water. Ryan Tannehill kind of stepped up, did what he needed to do, and then obviously King Henry, he wears that crown for a reason. He just did his thing. I mean, 133 yards. That one breakaway, what was it, 33-yard rush to win the game in overtime.
Yeah.
Was the deciding factor. But it is very, very difficult to keep a team like Tennessee down unless you dominate early and continue to keep your foot on the gas pedal. So you cannot let up.
And I mean, like looking at the game yesterday, like I thought Tannehill was decent. And I thought even Lamar Jackson was decent. Now, Lamar Jackson did have that one interception. I believe it was in the second half when really the Ravens offense just wasn't able to get anything going. But Tannehill was able to lead them on some solid drives, especially in the second half. And really, down 21-10 on the road, it's not easy to come back from that, but they were able to kind of pound their way back and take the lead. Now, granted, the Ravens tied it up before the end of the fourth quarter, but the Titans definitely showed a lot of resiliency to get back into that game and then in overtime clinch it for the win.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with you only because we both know in this league, an offensively driven league, we cannot settle for 186 yards passing. It's not going to win games. I mean, you can run the ball for 200 yards a game, but if you're not putting the ball in the end zone through the air at least one or two times, you're never going to win. And Lamar Jackson, he had 33. He had 13 carries though. That takes away a lot from attempts at running the ball, or attempts at throwing the ball, trying to find mismatches in coverage. If they know 7 out of 10 times Lamar's going to drop back and sprint, you're going to have a spy, and you're going to take away the opportunity to take the ball away.
Mm-hmm. I think it's just with the way that the Titans offense runs. That team is not really built to where Ryan Tannehill is going to throw for like 300, 350 yards when you got somebody like Derrick Henry in the backfield. They're definitely going to have a balanced attack with passing and rushing. And I know Ryan Tannehill is not the greatest quarterback in the world, but I thought when he needed to be yesterday, I thought he stepped up, made some solid throws. And then when you combine that with what Derrick Henry was able to do in the second half, was able to get some solid rushes where he was able to break off 15 to 20-yard rushes in the second half. I think for them, that's the way that they're going to win. And really, like the last season or two, that's the way that they've been winning games. And they've been winning by smart quarterback play, because obviously Ryan Tannehill is not going to light you up, but run the ball with Derrick Henry and just let him go to work. And I think yesterday it worked out for them. And their defense stepped up in the second half. They were able to slow down Lamar Jackson. And the thing about Lamar Jackson was he wasn't really able to really connect with his receivers outside of really Mark Andrews and I think it was Willie Snead yesterday, because Hollywood Brown did nothing in that game yesterday. It was really just, he was only throwing to really Mark Andrews, Willie Snead, and then maybe J.K. Dobbins out of the backfield. But that was pretty much it. And I thought Dobbins actually had a decent game. He had some decent touches, ended up getting a rushing touchdown as well. But it just seems like Lamar Jackson's been struggling to hit some of his receivers. It just really kind of established some sort of consistency with Hollywood Brown the entire year. And Hollywood Brown's let them know about it this year.
Oh, without a doubt. And just for clarity purposes, I was referring to Lamar Jackson. If I said Ryan Tannehill by mistake, I definitely meant to say Lamar in terms of the point I made right before you just spoke.
Mm-hmm.
Lamar is the one that had 186. We all know that Ryan Tannehill is a situational quarterback. He is kind of a plug, so to speak. As long as you have a dominant running back, a somewhat competent offense, in an average NFL defense, Ryan Tannehill is going to go out there. He's not going to lose you a game. He's not going to win you a game, because we all know Ryan Tannehill is a game management, throw it when I need to, and just hit open receivers when I have to kind of quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, we know that Baltimore lives and dies by Lamar. If Lamar has a poor game, they will not win. And a lot of people are continuing to say he's still learning, he's still growing, he's this, blah, blah, blah. I disagree completely. I think that Lamar Jackson is going to get as good as he gets within the next year or two, and that's about it. I mean, I don't know if he hit the ceiling last season with his MVP season, just like RG3 did in his rookie of the year campaign. We know what mobile quarterbacks bring to the table. You're electrifying. You are a game changer. You're an X factor in your own respect. But we know that this is a quarterback driven league. And if you cannot drop back and throw for a minimum of 225 to 250 yards with 2 to 3 scores, you are not going to succeed. Their
Mm-hmm.
defense is stellar. Their defense has talent. Yes, they've been injured. But if you cannot go out there and maintain a lead like this late in the year, as we are in the second half, you're only going to continue to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
The AFC North is a tough, strong division, as we talked about earlier, with Cleveland going out and winning and doing what they needed to do as well. But they're going to need to wake up. I would say Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh got a little bit of fire lit underneath them, because if they continue to lose games, they're going to fall out of this playoff hunt real quick.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. So move on to the next game. So we had the Patriots go up against the Texans yesterday. So the Texans were able to move to get their third win of the season. So they won yesterday 27-20. Sean Watson had a solid day, 28 of 37 for 344 yards, had 3 touchdowns overall, had 2 passing touchdowns and then 1 rushing touchdown. Cam Newton had a decent day as well, was 26 of 40, threw for 300. He threw for 365 yards yesterday and added a passing touchdown as well. Was overall, like, this game, like, I thought the Texans really got out of the gate hot, and it seemed to bode well for them enough to get the win, just because the Patriots weren't able to close the gap in the second half. Patriots did get close. They had some drives that they could have capitalized on in the second half, but just weren't able to execute and get points. But overall, I thought the Patriots defense gave up way too many points in the first half. Outside of that first drive in the first half, it seemed like the Texans were able to march down the field with consistent ease. And Deshaun Watson has really given them trouble in really the 3 matchups that he's gone up against the Patriots. I mean, the Patriots are 1-2 against him, and they honestly could be 0-3 if it wasn't for Brady throwing a touchdown to Brandon Cooks a couple years ago with about 30 seconds left to get them the win. But it's really like Deshaun Watson's athleticism and his ability to just extend plays with his feet that I think really makes a difference for the Texans against the Patriots.
And I think that's the big difference between quarterbacks like Deshaun, like Lamar, like a Vic back in the day. Deshaun is what I call a hybrid. Deshaun can do it with his legs, but he does it enough where he can remain behind the line of scrimmage and continue to make plays with his arm.
Mm-hmm.
So we all know that the offensive line in Houston is absolutely horrific. We all know that Bill O'Brien has completely stripped that team of any talent that it has. And yet Deshaun Watson continues to keep this team within striking distance at all times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say he can lead them down the field against anybody, but I would probably bet over 50% of the time, if you give him a competent offensive line, or, a solid receiving core, should I say, not an offensive line, he can go out there and win. It doesn't help that Randall Cobb got knocked out of the first quarter. It doesn't help that Brandon Cooks was also hurt as well later in that game. So, I mean, the offense did take a few hits in terms of injury. But as you said, the Patriots find a way to come back at the second half and really not shut him down, but kind of keep him in check. And you guys just didn't execute down the stretch. You scored in the third, but I mean, afterwards, it just kind of seemed like you guys were kind of exchanging punt for punt for punt. And Houston found a way to continue to hold on that lead and score at least a few more points to give them the win.
Yeah, and like with Cam, like Cam had some decent opportunities to make some plays. Now he did have that one nice touchdown pass to Demir Bird for over. It was like, I believe it was like a 55-yard passing touchdown to Bird on that play in the third quarter. But there were some easy throws that he missed, and these were easy check down passes. Like he had a couple passes where he's throwing it to either James White or Rex Burkhead out of the backfield. And he's just short arming the throws, and they're ending up at their feet. Like they're just not able to make the plays to extend drives. And really, like I thought yesterday, the one nice thing that I thought Houston did pretty well was that they constantly brought pressure from the outside. They would have corners come in and just try to get after Cam, especially like if New England was running a play action pass, they would blitz one of those corners to get after Cam. So like he wouldn't have time to sit in the pocket and kind of assess the field to make a throw. And it's just like, at this point, it's like, I think really the only way that New England can win games moving forward is if they're going to run the ball 25 to 30 times, get 150 yards plus on the ground. And then if Cam has like a solid day where he's efficient, maybe throws to like 150 to 200 yards and doesn't turn the ball over, That's the only way that I think they're going to win moving forward. And it's just if they turn the ball over or if the defense isn't playing well, they're just not going to be able to win because, to be honest with you, they just don't have the talent and they just don't have the quarterback play to get it done offensively throughout the entire for this whole season. It's just not going to happen this year.
Yeah, it's funny because I know I just said the opposite for Lamar, him having to throw more. But in your case with Cam Newton, we know that his playing style is kind of split 50-50
Yeah.
depending on the defense that he plays. He's gonna kill you on the ground, he's gonna get in the end zone one or two times, or he's gonna gash you in the air with his arm. Here's my biggest concern with Cam. I really think that offseason shoulder surgery did a lot worse for him than it did good. And here's why. The last play of the game, the Texans ran a two-man rush, and Cam had plenty of time to throw that ball, step into it. The man was 12 yards short of the end zone, and that was only a 55-yard pass.
Mm-hmm.
Cam Newton, for whatever
Yep.
reason,
Yeah.
just doesn't look like himself. The
Yep.
zip behind the ball isn't there. The confidence, the swagger, the boistering. Cam doesn't look like himself. Could that be the system in Foxborough? Possibly, but I really think Cam's best suited for a team, if not a play calling coach in which he has the freedom to do what he needs to do for a team to succeed. Because there were games where he did have those 11 or 12 rushes and he had 60 yards on the ground and 2 rushing scores, but just still lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that was in part to your defense not playing up to par, because we all know the talent that you have. But Cam Newton seems to go back and forth on a week-to-week basis. I think last week he only had, under 200 yards throwing against Baltimore, but you found a way to squeak that win. But your team overall had a lot of rushing yards, and you guys found a way to effectively gash that defense for over 150 yards. And then this week you shy away from the run, and Cam has an efficient day in the air, and you lose by 7.
Yeah, and I mean, like, really this year, like, it's not like they've gotten blown out in a lot of games this year. They've definitely had some down games for sure. But I'll give the Patriots coaching staff credit because obviously you're moving on from Tom Brady and you're trying to adjust the entire offensive system around Cam. And Cam is a completely different type of player with a completely different skill set than Tom Brady. And I think, granted, their wide receiving core is weak at best,
To say the least.
but they could still like get these guys into decent situations and decent opportunities to make some plays. It's just it was like you said with that Hail Mary pass. I mean, he was throwing from like what yard line was he throwing from yesterday?
He was behind the 50 for sure. So I would say he was on maybe the 40.
Yeah,
But
like,
it's just he was so short and he put in such effort. It just looked like he'll never get back to that strength again.
I mean, you could take an average run of the mill quarterback. It doesn't even have to be Aaron Rodgers. It doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes. It doesn't have to be Tom Brady. They could get that ball down there with relative ease from like the 40-yard line on your side of the field to throw it 60 plus yards down the field to get a possible Hail Mary touchdown. But it was like you said, like to have it that short. I mean, they caught the ball at like the 10-yard line, but that ball's got to get into the end zone. At least
he didn't give his
at
players an opportunity.
At least give your guys a chance. And it's just, I think with him, it's just Cam is definitely limited. That shoulder surgery has probably had a bigger impact than we've all realized. And his mechanics, they just look funky. Like him throwing the ball, it does look uncomfortable. Yeah. So unless he's in rhythm and he can get the ball out quick. But even on those, if he doesn't have his feet set right, it just the mechanics overall just look funky. I mean, really with this loss yesterday, I mean, it pretty much ends their season anyway. I was pretty much of the mindset that their season was over after they dropped down to 2-5. They did win 2 in a row to kind of stabilize themselves. But at 4-6, just not going to happen this year.
No, and that's okay because you do still have the greatest coach of all time. As much as it pains me to say, you do have players coming back on contract. Players that are coming back from the COVID reserve list or the opting out COVID list, should I say, that are going to make this team a better football team. It's just a matter of now who is going to replace the most important piece of the team in Tom Brady, because we all know Cam Newton isn't doing it, and we know that he won't be re-signed next year. Is it going to be Brian Hoyer? I hope not, for your sake. No. Is it going to be Sudfeld, whatever his name is? I don't know. Stidham?
Yeah, it's I don't see. And the thing is, I don't really know where they go from here. I mean, you could definitely try to get Stidham some reps, but you got to at least let Cam play. I think the rest of the season. I think even despite the fact that the team has struggled, I think overall, I think he's gained at least somewhat of the trust of his teammates. And I think just out of respect, you let him finish off the season. But I think their main issue is going to be this offseason about whether or not they roll forward with Stidham next year. More than likely, they're probably going to draft a quarterback in the draft next year. So I guess that'll be something to look forward to for them. But I mean, overall, not only that, they do have to address that wide receiving core. That wide receiving core needs to be addressed, or it's just they just haven't been able to really develop decent receivers out of the draft. I mean, N'Keal Harry has just been just super inconsistent. I know he's been hurt, but it's a struggle for him to get separation. I mean,
You
hell, their
guys,
best receiver is a college quarterback. I mean, excuse me, he was a high school quarterback turned receiver, and he's the only guy that's getting some sort of separation. Damiere Byrd might have a game here or there, but outside of those two guys, Cam really doesn't have that much to throw to. Julian Edelman's hurt, so it's just they're going to have to do something with this wide receiving core. They're just going to have to do something better with just developing these receivers because they just can't get it right.
as funny as it is, knowing how much I hate the Patriots, you do kind of feel for it as a football fan. You kind of look at it, and that wide receiver room is a hard knocks receiver room at best. I mean that there's nobody there that you're gonna look into if you're a rookie receiver coming in like, oh, that's my vet. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the guy I want to learn from. Like I'd rather do it on my own, bro, because you ain't really doing much.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we all know the Patriots aren't a draft heavy team. You guys do not draft very well whatsoever. I mean, you might have a niche here or there, a player here or there, but in terms of breeding somebody to grow into a system and become a star, we all know you guys take some guys that are coming off of big deals, guys that are coming off of injury. You sign them for a year, you'll go to the Super Bowl because the rest of the team is good, and then you'll never hear about those players ever again.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of what are you going to do this offseason? Excluding the draft, what moves do you see yourself doing?
I mean, at this point, I don't know what the cap figures are going to be like next year. So I know that the figure is somewhere around 20 to 25 million for the cap next year. So you definitely have to include the guys that opted out this year because of COVID. But there's going to be some changes. There's going to be some changes. I wouldn't be surprised if they move on from Stephon Gilmore this offseason. It wouldn't shock me because there were even trade rumors that were flying around earlier this year that he could have been moved, but they didn't end up pulling the trigger on that. Other than that, I think with them, they're going to have to do something, obviously, with the quarterback position. I think their running back position is fine. They definitely have a running back by committee and on that side of the offense. Their offensive line's fine, so I don't see really any issues there. I think that defense is starting to get a little bit older, especially like Devin McCourty, Patrick Chung. Those guys are probably near the end of their career, so we'll definitely see how that goes. But they're definitely gonna have to bring some youth into this team and some speed. I really think that they need some speed because you see what like Patrick Mahomes has. Granted, they may not be the biggest guys, but those receivers that they have, they're fast and they know how to run their routes. I think at this point, New England definitely has to incorporate some speed into their receiving core. I think that if they're able to do that through the draft, or they're able to make some moves in free agency, that might work out for them. But outside of that, just keep developing the guys that they have and hope for the best. I mean, don't get me wrong, New England has definitely had their misses for sure in the draft, but when they hit, they've had some grand slams in the draft with Tom Brady and Gronk. So, kind of, the word's still out on the Patriots, when it comes to their draft capital for next year. So we'll definitely see how that goes. But moving on to the last two games that we have here, we'll talk a little bit about the Eagles and the Browns, and then the Cowboys versus the Vikings yesterday. But we'll start with the Eagles and the Browns. So the Browns won yesterday, 22-17, in an ugly game just because of the rain. But with the win, the Browns moved to 7-3, so now they're currently second in the AFC North. Baker had an average day, 12 of 22, 240 yards, no passing touchdowns. Wentz continued to struggle yesterday, 21 to 35, 235 yards passing, 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. On the running side of the ball, I thought Nick Chubb had a solid day, 20 carries, 114 yards. Kareem Hunt also added a rushing touchdown as well. Just overall, I thought the Browns did what they needed to do to get the win yesterday, but man, the Eagles they've been struggling, man. I mean, they've just been a disappointment this year. Granted, I know they've had some injuries and I know they've had some COVID issues, but so is everybody else. It's just Carson Wentz has really struggled this year.
It's really hard to say why. I mean, it's hard to like kind of shelter from it. It's all Wentz. It's all Wentz's fault. It's you can make a point to it's the offensive line as well. You can make a point to it's a lot of the injuries. The receiving core has been banged up. But we're looking at week 10 right now. I've watched almost every single Eagle game because obviously, you know, Isabel's family's from Philly. So that's pretty much my second team at this point. And when I do a deep dive, I do a deep dive into every position and what it is that they need. And it just seems that Carson Wentz is no longer what he used to be. Call it a chalk up to injuries over the course of his career. Call it a lack of confidence. I don't know what it is, but when that man drops back to throw, he's either getting cracked by some defensive end, he's trying to make a play that he doesn't need to make, or he's just making an errant throw, forcing something down the field that he thinks he sees it's unnecessary. The Eagles are losing games because of Carson Wentz's lack of discipline.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to understand, first and foremost, if there is no play, it is better to let go of that ball, throw it out of bounds, throw it into the dirt, and just accept the loss of the down. Carson is still stuck on, hey, I'm Carson Wentz. I'm elusive enough. I'm shifty. I'm going to duck over a sack. I'm going to try to jab step around or spin move out of a hit. But he's losing the ball, I want to say 6 out of 10 times. And it's pretty bad. It's costing his team not only sanity, but it's costing them wins. And I mean, for whatever reason, Philly tends to make probably some of the worst play calls I've ever seen. Doug Peterson still thinks that Carson is what he used to be in his MVP season when the Eagles won the Super Bowl a few years back, but he's just not. The implementation of Jalen Hurts is not gone as well as they had thought. And for whatever reason, they just abandoned that run game early on. Miles Sanders was averaging 6 yards per carry in the first quarter. He had 6 yards for the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm.
That is, you don't do that. You weren't down 30 points to where you had to throw it 35 times. You weren't down 40 points to where you completely just felt like, benching your team. The defense kept them within this game, rain or not. 22 points and 7 of that was a pick six. The defense isn't terrible. People are out here blowing it out of proportion saying that the defense isn't getting it done. Absolutely not. This defense is pretty freaking stellar. That front four with Malik Jackson, Brandon Graham, oh my God, Derek Barnett, and Fletcher Cox. Those those are 4 former Pro Bowlers.
Yeah,
they're all pro players, and you're going to sit here and tell me Philadelphia is bad on the defensive end? Absolutely not. If Carson Wentz cuts his turnovers by a quarter, the Eagles' record is completely different.
Yeah, I mean, he's leading the league in turnovers at the quarterback position. I mean, and some of these throws that he's making are just, I mean, I'll say this, like I didn't think he had like the interceptions that he had yesterday. The second one was the worst one.
Oh my God.
That second one was just, and the thing is, they were actually still in that game at that point. And granted, it's late in the game, and they were down 22-10 at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is, even if they were able to get a touchdown off of that next drive that Cleveland went on ended pretty quickly, and they were able to get the ball back and score pretty quickly. Like, and it's kind of that, it's been that kind of year with the Eagles, because in the first quarter, Miles Sanders fumbles it on the 5-yard line. At worst, they were probably going to get 3 points. At best, they could have gotten 7, but they lose the ball, and then they don't get any points off of that. And then at the end of the game, Carson just throws basically just a lob pass that gets picked off easily by Cleveland, and you miss out on points. You take that first possession of the game, if you get at least a field goal off of that, and then at worst a field goal at that possession later in the game, and then get the ball back and then score a touchdown. I mean, that's 13 points that they missed out on. and potentially.
Let me interject really quick, not to cut you off. Hold on 1 second. That Miles Sanders fumble, he had both hands on the football. It is pouring rain.
I get
And
it. I
what
get
does
it.
every football coach tell you? Aim for the ball when it's raining.
I get it.
This man, I don't even remember who it was. The crown of his helmet, it popped it out. So I mean, Miles did everything fundamentally in what you're supposed to do. Don't resist, fall down, go down with glory, and make sure you protect that. He lost it. The
Mm-hmm.
second one, he got hit by the corner on his blind side. He's not looking right at all. What is he supposed to do? The running back was open in the flat. I don't remember if it was Miles Sanders or if it was Boston Scott, but he was wide open and he clearly was about to check it down. And he got hit from the backside, which in turn you're going to float the football because of the impact.
Mm-hmm.
Those two turnovers are not the Philadelphia Eagles' fault. I mean, obviously Miles Sanders has to hold the ball, but you try getting hit by a 270-pound defensive lineman in the soaking wet rain in the mud
Oh, I
in the
get it.
middle of a pile.
I
You
get
know what I'm
it.
saying? I sound like an Eagles fan and I'm not, but it's like you have to be realistic in the situation as well. The second interception is all Carson Wentz's fault, but the first two turnovers,
No,
you
the
have
first
to look at it. You have to look at it like, well, what am I supposed to do? You know?
the first one, I don't really blame on Carson. It just happens. But that second one,
The second one was
that second
absolutely uncalled for.
that
The
second
stupid
one was bad. So
double coverage.
the first one, it was just unfortunate because it turned into a pick six. Like,
Yeah. I
so
mean, breakaway speed, pouring
yeah,
rain. The one guy you were going to catch him, it wasn't going to happen.
yeah. If Carson at least throws that with a little bit of zip on it, because if he's not getting pressured, that's an easy catch that probably goes for 5 to 10 yards.
Exactly.
But gets hit at the line, floats the ball, it's a pick six, and then you're down 7-0 at that point. So it's just, and with the Miles Sanders fumble, don't get me wrong, it was pouring down rain, and I don't know why. Like in the last 2 weeks, where it's just been pouring down rain in Cleveland, it's just been that type of. I guess it's really been those two type of games where it's just poured down rain in the last 2 weeks in Cleveland. But they had an opportunity to get points and really get ahead of, really establish some rhythm on the offense side of the ball, and it just sucks to see that drive get stalled out at the 5-yard line just because of losing the ball. It happens. It sucks, but the result still remains, and it cost them points.
Yeah, turnover's a turnover. No excusing it there. Again, man, watching these games on Sundays with Isabel's family, it's just crazy to see how badly Doug Peterson manages a game and what he decides to do. I mean, don't get me wrong, Carson still got to hit throws, but for the most part, you just kind of look at it like, what are you calling? Why are you calling a running back draw in that situation? Or what are you doing throwing a bubble screen on 3rd and 13? Like, you don't have good enough playmakers to go out there and go and get you those yards after the catch. I mean, yes, Rager is fast, but he is not a Deshaun Jackson of 10 years ago. You know what I mean? So I don't know what he's thinking. I think Philadelphia ends up losing the division, if I'm giving my honest opinion, because of how poorly they're playing. And it's a 3-way tie basically right now. Philly's up by a half a game only because of the tie.
I mean, if we're going to be honest, all 4 teams are still in contention. All 4 of them are still like literally like within either.
They're all 3-7.
Yeah. I know. Doesn't Philly didn't they have that one tie?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, they're all 3-7 except for Philly's tie, but Philly only leads because of the tie.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, you can flip a coin for each team and just like they got a decent shot at still winning the division. That's just how bad the freaking NFC East is.
The Giants will win the division. Mark my words. That's my bet.
The Giants have been, even though they've lost some really tough games. I mean, there was one stretch where I think they lost like 4 games in a row with like the combined points that they lost by was no more than 10 points.
Yep.
Like they're losing games extremely close, but they play really competitive. I know their record doesn't show, but the Giants do play hard.
Yep, and kudos to your former coach, your special teams coach. Joe Judge has really kind of walked into that locker room and said, "I'm not taking no shit, and I'm out here, and this is what we're gonna do, and either you're with it or you're not." And I earned respect for that man when I found out he made Saquon Barkley run gassers because he talked back to him.
Yeah, you can't let literally like one of the like. Don't get me wrong, like Saquon's probably the best player on the team, but you can't disrespect your coach. You can't do that. Not gonna work.
That's as old, man. That's our parents' age. That's what we grew up on. You back talk, you better get ready to run. In this league with the prima donnas and I run this team. This is my squad. For him to walk in there as a rookie head coach and say, "What'd you say, Barkley? You better get ready to run." And when he did that, I said, this boy don't play. So Joe Judge is changing the culture in that locker room.
It wouldn't have surprised me if Odell was still on the Giants. Like if Joe Judge either traded him or just got rid of him, just
Absolutely.
because he's just not going to take that. Like he's just not going to take all the shenanigans that OBJ brings, whether it was in New York or whether it was in Cleveland. It's just not going to work out. So,
No shot.
but I guess for Joe Judge's sake, he never really had to deal with him, which I guess kind of worked out in the end.
Yep.
But the last game that I have here is the Cowboys versus the Vikings. So Cowboys won a close one yesterday, 31-28. And to be honest with you, I thought the Vikings were going to win this game fairly convincingly just because Dallas has really not shown any sort of – they just haven't shown any sort of consistency. The defense has been atrocious the entire year. Obviously, after Dak's injury, they can't get any sort of consistency out of the quarterback position. Zeke has not been the same except for this game against the Vikings yesterday. But overall, I thought Zeke had a solid day on the ground. I thought Andy Dalton, for all the grief that we've been giving him really like the last two seasons with Cincinnati, thought he played pretty well yesterday. And the defense stepped up at the end when it needed to, when the Vikings had a chance to win the game. But I appreciate the fact that the Cowboys went out there. They looked fresh off of that bye week, and they went out and really surprised me. I was not expecting the Cowboys to get this win. I thought the Vikings would have won pretty convincingly, but Cowboys shocked me yesterday, and I thought they played pretty well.
I'm pretty sure the Cowboys shocked themselves with how well they played. I mean, we all know Minnesota was kind of trending on their little 2 to 3 game win streak that they had in the last couple of weeks, upsetting and, playing well up against a couple of teams that they were favored to lose against. And the way Dalvin Cook's been playing out of this world has just been kind of completely insane. And, the inclusion of Justin Jefferson balling out and, Adam Thielen kind of silencing a lot of those haters that said Justin Jefferson was coming for his head. But, I mean, looking at this only furthers my point in the stat sheet. When Ezekiel Elliott has a good game, the Cowboys win.
Yep.
Over 100 yards on the ground, 5 yards carry.
Pollard had a decent game too.
Pollard had that one breakaway run for a touchdown, but I mean, excluding that,
but still,
Zeke led the way, 103 yards. If he would have gotten into the end zone, it would have been better. But I mean, Andy Dalton only having 10 incompletions, 22 of 32 for 203 and 3 scores. He looked pretty good. And like you said, the defense did what it needed to do. CeeDee Lamb, probably arguably one of the catch of the years with that turnaround, completely juggling and altercation of how, or I don't even know how to shifting of his body.
The way that he was able to contort his body while falling down. Yes. And literally, the way that he was looking like the opposite way and then was able to twist his body and then somehow get his hands on it and bring it down. It was an amazing catch. Not only that, though, I mean, that game had 2 really good catches. You had that one, obviously, by CeeDee Lamb. And then Adam Thielen
catch in the corner.
Adam Thielen just snagged it with that one-handed grab, did the toe drag. It just made it look easy. So, easy.
It's a beast. And sadly enough, he tested positive for COVID today, so he'll be out next week.
And he's on my fantasy team, so.
He's on one of mine, too, but I'm out of the playoffs in that league. So, oh, well.
But no, I thought the Cowboys showed up, and I thought Andy Dalton was actually decent. I didn't think that he had that bad of a game. So I think really at this point, with the Cowboys, the best that they could hope for, hopefully they can get Zeke going, and hopefully the offensive line can get some holes open for him so where he can get some decent carries. But as long as Andy Dalton doesn't turn the ball over and is able to at least march down the field consistently to at least set them up for some potential points, whether it's a field goal or whether it's a touchdown, I think really it's the best thing that I can hope for. Because, I mean, they're going to have to score points because the defense is going to give up 25 points a game. That defense is just – I mean, Kirk Cousins has been so wildly inconsistent. You don't know what type of game that he's going to give you. He could give you a 350-yard day, throw 3 or 4 touchdowns, and then the next game he could literally throw 100 yards with 3 or 4 interceptions. So I thought Kirk had a solid game yesterday, but the Cowboys did enough to slow him down when it counted the most. And I'll at least give some props to the Cowboys defense for that. But going forward, they're still going to give up 25 points a game. That defense is atrocious.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see Dallas winning that division as bad as they are, even winning the next, maybe 1 or 2 games. I think Dallas kind of ends it where they are right now, unless Andy Dalton comes out of nowhere after the concussion and he just starts to slice it up. But Dallas's ceiling is as high as their quarterback play is going to go, and without Dak Prescott, we just see how bad they really are.
And Dak was really carrying that team.
Yep, probably an MVP candidate if we're being honest.
I mean, if he had gotten that team to 8-8, that would have been impressive just because of how bad this defense is.
We both can agree that man's getting paid this season.
He has to.
He's about to get that bag. Whether it's Dallas or not, someone's giving him a bag.
Oh, yeah. Shit. I know New England's not giving him that.
I mean, hey, you might be desperate enough.
New England's not going to shell that type of money. New England's not going to shell $40 million on a quarterback like that.
You're not wrong. You locked up Gilmore, and then you're about to get rid of him. It just goes to show you guys rent players, man.
But Gilmore gave and that honestly depends if we keep Gilmore, which I just don't see. I just don't see that happening. Because, I mean, we kind of had a similar situation with Darrelle Revis back in 2014 after we won that Super Bowl. And we gave him a decent contract, but he ended up going to the Jets. So
went back, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, if I'm Stephon Gilmore, pretty much this contract is his last chance to really break the bank. And I think with him, it's not going to be with New England. I just don't see that happening because, I mean, they shelled out $12 million a year to get him, which is really kind of unlike New England to actually do that. And, if you're to move to the quarterback position, I think the most that they paid Tom Brady was a little bit over 30 million, if that. So they're not going to shell out $40 million for Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott should end up with the Cowboys. That deal should have honestly gotten done before this season, but they obviously weren't able to come to terms, and look what happened.
It's a pretty nice franchise tag. $32 million. Excuse the shit out of me.
I wouldn't complain about that either. $32 million. But I think with Dak, he definitely wants that.
Oh, 100%.
He definitely wants that deal. He wants that security. So
that's that guaranteed money.
Yeah.